Thanks, Z. This is Jason Renaud. I'll be on um, here we are. Thanks for doing this, Z. I just want to start by saying we were having some technical problems with the Zoom conference. We're only able to get 100 people into the room. We're going to be sending everyone a email. You may have already received it to re-enter a new Zoom room, which we'll do after Z and I are done with this Q&A. We'll all transition into a new Zoom room and proceed with the rest of the conference there. So I hope that and we'll have Z's talk is recorded, and we'll be sending out all the recordings from this conference a few days after the conference is concluded. Give us a little time to get it sorted out and in a nice format for you. And we'll send that to you so you can review those, and that'll help satisfy the conditions for your credentialing. But Z, thanks so much for doing this. Every time you and I get a chance to hear you, I'm inspired and somewhat recommit to making this right. You're distinguishing that this is not going to be a training conference. We're not going to give de-escalation tips. We're going right into the philosophy, the big problems of mobile crisis work, and that is coercion and co-optation. Um, if people have questions for Z, if people have questions for this discussion, now's the time to raise your hand. Amir Chappell, our Zoom operator, will let you in to the conversation. You can speak to Z or myself directly, or you can put questions in the chat and I will read them to Z. And since I don't see any questions yet, and Amir, do we have any hands up? Anybody in the conference have a question yet? I'll go ahead and move into a question I had. Now, Z, you talk about that not all crises can be resolved. And this is where the rubber meets the road, when the clinician is in the room and they feel something dangerous might happen and that they would be held responsible if that person injures themselves or injured someone else. They would be responsible for that bad outcome. How do we deal with that as employees of organizations? We're not just running around with friends. We can't say, oh, we can make this decision unilaterally.
So I guess I want to start with, and I think it's actually quoted, the study is quoted in When Conversations Turn to Suicide by Wildflower, that the odds of being held liable for suicide is arguably equal to being struck by lightning.
So, but
Um,
let's get to the dig into this because
yeah,
that's all fine. But the lawyers are going to say, I don't care. I want certainty. I want zero risk.
you can't give them that. Suicide risk assessments don't even give you that.
So
Um,
that's the conflict there.
yeah, so like I actually at a time was supporting someone in a position where I was credentialed as a substance use counselor.
Hmm.
And I was working with someone who died by suicide, and my notes were subpoenaed, and it was a person who had aged into my program, and I was not held responsible. And I'm someone who defected out of the work because when they said you need to dispatch police or like ensure the people that you're supporting won't die, it was like this is George Floyd had just been murdered. Like I want to die too. And so knowing how faulty suicide risk assessment scales are in themselves, I mean, I think the question really is, why do we giving ourselves that much power? And does that truly make sense? Some crises can't be resolved. Just to give like an example, like the way that I support people was largely changed by my 9-month-old goddaughter died of a drug poisoning. And my best friend, since I was in seventh grade, every day she wanted to die, and every day we spoke on the phone. And honestly, I completely understood. When it comes to grief and loss, nothing is going to bring someone's child back.
Hmm.
There's some pain that actually cannot be worked with. It just exists. And the truth is, some people are living lives that we would not want to experience. And that's the hard thing nobody wants to say is like, you're not living in that person's body. We can't take authority over that. So I think it's just that personal balance and decision of like, to what degree do I feel responsible for someone staying alive? And then when it comes to my humanity outside of the job, isn't this more about their right to live the life that's meaningful for them? And who am I to decide that?
Is part of this dilemma because we're really being birthed in between the public health system and the public safety system, which has had a different ethos than the peer lived experience community?
I think public health has it a lot, at least where I'm from, public health is more on track than public safety. I think it's when I think about public safety, it's like, what do they mean by public safety? Um, I guess it depends on how they're defining public safety.
Well, the in law enforcement, the idea of respecting someone's independence and autonomy and allowing them the space to be unhealthy is impossible.
I think this is where, and this is one of the reasons I think a lot about my ancestry when I do presentations like this is only in a country like this that was born from the history we have would believe in having such a control over its actual citizens. Yeah, my half my family lives in Nigeria. I have four half siblings, one of which hears voices and deals with a lot of suicidal thoughts and feelings because she's not heterosexual. And it's not seen as something to remedy. It's seen as
Hmm.
something that she lives with.
Yeah, that instinct to remedy. Ashley has a great point. And Ashley, you want to come on and make this point? You want to unmic and say this so everyone can hear it?
Sure. Just clarifying, me
Caught
actually.
you, caught you with food in your mouth. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I also just ate a pineapple. But so these are some of the things that I have actually learned as a provider as well, trying to navigate big bureaucracy, and I see it in mobile crisis. But overall, yeah, I think we conflate state and trade, right? So case in point, my dissertation was on self-esteem. So I looked at state self-esteem and trait self-esteem. And that's how I really learned how to differentiate both state and trait. So with SI, so in my private practice, I actually specialize in the folks who have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, right? And with that population, you learn a lot of folks, their baseline is SI,
Right.
right? And what it rather is a part of them that wants to die, a part of them that wants to avoid. So I learned very early on in my work that learning how to differentiate the two, right? So do
Mhm.
you really want to die? Or are we just trying to escape a situation? Like, let me clarify, the state of the world is really scary for certain populations right now,
Mhm.
right? And the way that things are going is really threatening. And yeah, I can normalize you wanting to die in these situations, when you don't know where your next meal is coming from, when you don't. Yeah, so you've got your state self esteem. So, like, say right now, I'm feeling state is how you're feeling in the moment, how you're feeling right now, right? So, for some folks, SI is I'm feeling like this right now, but it doesn't really mean anything in the long run. It means I want to die right now, possibly some talking, working with somebody like myself to de-escalate or peer support, to say, yeah, I understand, I've been there, versus your trait, which is like, hey, this is not baseline for me. I'm having these thoughts and they're very intrusive and I have a plan, right? So I would
Well,
like to.
thanks, Ashley.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Ashley. That's really very helpful to sort out that difference between state and trait. Z, you want to respond?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like as someone who's gone through like extreme and altered states, like I think some things in life just lead people to be in states for very long times. about very specific things. Like if you've had a series of close personal losses, if you've become disabled from like a chronic illness or an injury, I think there's such a, and even like talking with other folks that have also had experiences of wanting to die, there's not always even internal clarity on if that's something I really want to do or just a feeling. And so I think like it's this, the problem for me is that there's a lot of distraction toward analyzing and psychoanalyzing and figuring out what this means. And it's still based in fear of like, I don't want you to die. And at the end of the day, as like an ad, like I'm a studying death worker, as I said, and like I'm like a big advocate for MAID, which is medication assisted dying. We have such little control over things in our lives, and we don't get to control how we're born. We don't get to control how we live for many ways. One of the things we do deserve control over is how we die. And so I think the question for me is like when someone shares that like really deep thing to me, it's like, not why do you want to die, but how do you want to die? What do you think it will be like? Because some of the things that have not, and I'm not saying to coerce people out of it, but like some of the reasons that I stay are like actually very trivial. Like I just don't know what it's like on the other side, and I don't know if it'll be better. Or like, what if they don't have HBO over there? So I just think that there's a lot of, at the end of the day, it's about your intention. And as a care provider, it's this very like God complex thing that clinicians and therapists and peers do when it's like this staying alive at all costs. It's like people that are in medicine don't even believe that. They believe in preserving quality of life. And we've seen what happens when we talk
Hmm.
about extending life at any cost.
Hmm. And sometimes that life at any cost is autonomy and self-respect.
Hmm.
Let me ask a question about respect, though. You mentioned that the sort of the status quo doesn't have respect for people with lived experience, doesn't have respect for that experience, and that leads them to assume this power and control. Can you unpack that a little bit? What it would mean to for the system per se to actually respect people with the lived experience of people with mental illness?
You mean like the employer system?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, from an employment context, I think that so some it's a double-edged sword because some of it's actually self-perpetuated by our own movement. Lots of it actually is. But
Mhm.
there's the piece of like peer support is not entry-level work. It's not DVR, it's not sheltered employment, um it's not rehabilitative employment. And I think when we bring people on as workers, as competent workers that excel in this highly specific, unique field and perceive them as pet projects, and then, there's a difference between a support and an accommodation and adopting people and then reinforcing this mindset of like, I hired the patient, which is sadly is where systemic peer support came from. That's how we got into Medicaid billable stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's a whole thing. But then there's also the peer support lived experience community of, I actually don't believe in the concept of lived expertise. You can have lived experience and be completely unskilled. And lived experience itself is not a qualifier for doing excellent work. Just like there's some great people that do crisis work that can do it in non-carceral styles that don't have lived experience. And then there's some folks that say, well, I have lived experience and my partner died by suicide, so that means no one else should die, and that means so lived experience as a trump card is one of the reasons I think there's like a lack of analysis when it comes to like lived experience is something I have. Everyone has lived experience. Peer support is something I do. So not every person with lived experience can actually do peer support well, and not every peer supporter actually has accurate lived experience. There should be like a Venn diagram.
You're making it really tough for the human resources folks here. Manning Walker has a great question in the chat. Manning, can you come on and say your question out loud?
Sure. So one of the things that I've encountered working with counties and cities in particular, when you're working with public health departments, public safety systems, if you're willing to invest lots of money in liability insurance and lots of attorney time and MOUs, you can push their comfort zones to a certain extent, but the cops will always have a lot of political power and can push back and threaten to pull the rug out at any moment. So how do you navigate that in your experience? Because I've become increasingly disenchanted with system work and want to do more direct service work with community organizations.
Great question.
Yeah, I actually don't do systems work to be honest. I've never found it helpful. I've always done like grassroots community focused work. And I think that some people spend a lot of time toiling away trying to train a system to do something or like retrain a system rather than build their own systems and support networks. And what I think about is where's my energy best spent and where can I build camaraderie more quickly. Systemic works just never, honestly, it's not inspired me personally. I know that for some people it has a lot of value, but I think about like, go back to maybe your ancestry of like, I come from a lineage of people that actually didn't have time to wait for systems to change. And the way that we kept ourselves safe and the way that we supported one another was acting in spite of the systems. So, like, my relationship with the police and systems has always been honestly kind of, I don't want to say separatist, but like, because we're in community, we have to acknowledge each other, right? Like, we're in the same vicinity, but I don't feel a need to partner, collaborate, co-write grants. It's like, the way that I see it is you do your work and we have a very distinctly different thing that we're doing. And when we need to call you for your thing, we'll do that. Like if like a building's on fire, but in terms of like mental health and supporting the community, that's not in your realm. It hasn't been done well. And I think that there's a different, you don't have to be adversarial, but it's just staying in my own lane, focused on what I'm doing, and then channeling all my energy into that has gotten me a lot further than wasting time. It's like a Sisyphus situation with the system. You just keep pushing a rock up and then just get sliding back.
That's tough. Let me shift gears a little bit. You mentioned the importance of understanding the history of the peer movement. Where would someone go to learn, someone who's new at doing peer services, where would they go to learn the history of the peer movement? How important is that in doing peer services?
I think it depends. There's so much fragmentation in movement. I think there's some really excellent material out there, but honestly, I think the best way to know peer movement is to talk to people, and build relationships with people who have been part of that work. So the folks that, I mean, I certainly learned a lot from Wildflower Alliance. I think even IDA, Institute for Development of Human Arts, has done some great stuff on peer movement. But a lot of the folks that have been in this movement have sadly passed away. Like we lost Celia Brown, just a few years ago. Many people in the movement are very co-opted. There's been a number of books written. It's not really something that you can study per se. It's more of something that I think you experience and you get bits and pieces along the way, and then you gradually come to understand yourself as part of something greater.
So there isn't a textbook that someone can go to. There isn't a single sort. Ken Burns hasn't done our story yet.
There's a lot of people that have tried to do things, but I have complicated feelings about mad studies.
Very good, very good. That's a whole
I've
nother
heard the
topic.
book. I have not read it myself, but I've heard Storming Bedlam is a good book. I think it's by Saoirse Warren. I haven't read it myself though.
You used another word just a moment ago, co-opted, and that's going to get us back into the philosophical realm. What do you mean by co-opted in this context?
Um, I think I have a lot of complicated feelings with my relationship to like lived experience and labor and how one makes a living.
Hmm.
And what I think back to is, civil rights movements, LGBTQ rights movements, disability rights movements, and the cost we pay when we commodify a movement for personal civil rights and autonomy, and when we manufacture that into job positions. And how I see it is if the work I'm doing would not do justice by people that literally died to make this possible, I won't do that. And I think there is a lot of peer support's like a sexy thing, and lived experience is like an exciting thing. And it's a very self-focused, hyper-individualist career field. And it's really scary, but it's easy to get to the point where it becomes more important to maintain a job in a field I like than think about the impact to people that are most impacted by the work I do. So I think if a person was in a psych hospital, or a person was, um, yeah, being harmed, and they were in the room with me while I'm doing what I'm doing, what would they say? And if I can't back it up, then I should leave my job.
Ouch. Ouch. These are some pretty hard lines.
Yeah,
Um,
because I mean, who we are isn't what we do. So that's my question is, what's the big deal? Just go do something else that's really cool. There's so many other ways to be liberatory. Like there's so many other jobs you could have. And if I wasn't in peer respite or peer support, um, I've only been doing this for 5 years. I would just do something else really cool. Before this, I did racial justice, I did restorative justice, I did disability supports. I worked in Easter Seals, for a youth respite camp. I had so many cool experiences before peer support, and so there is a before and there's an after.
so you're saying that your principles are really going to guide you in whether you're able to do this work or not.
Yeah, for me personally, I
Mhm.
don't think that everyone has to be that way, honestly. I don't like push that on anyone per se at all. It's just like my personal integrity. Yeah, and I think coming from a lineage that's been psychiatrized and being a mad person myself, it's like, selling out is not as concerning for some, and I don't really judge them for that. They're just not the people I'd work with.
Okay. We have a couple minutes for some more questions. Have a couple of what if questions in the chat. I'll read the question from John A. When imminent risk is present, we have a directive to take action, and maybe that will give someone more time and more to get more information and maybe make a different choice later. Um, Anything that gives someone more time when they're planning to end their life, is optimal. Um, it's the last thing, John says it's the last thing he would ever want to do, but when there's no other choice, uh, how do you not do whatever you can, even when that means calling dispatch?
I think sometimes the choice is that you're not the one to support them. Sometimes the choice is to not make a choice, or the choice is to call someone else in who has a better skill set. Um, and then with the other piece around like anything that gives someone more time is better. If their intention is to take their own life and that's their personal right, you actually might just be making their last moments all that more hard.
It's a very
So
tough
I
situation
guess,
to be in.
yeah, and just communicating it to that person, like I feel like I have
Mhm.
to do this thing. I'm really compelled to do this thing. Um, what do you think would happen if I like tried to get the knife away from you? Is this, um, and I think everyone wants to play the question is always like, what if someone has a weapon and they're threatening to harm someone else?
Mhm.
That's when I say like peer support's not violence prevention. If like we're not equipped to handle threat to others, that's not the same service, quote unquote. But even then, there's ways to navigate situations that I'd have to have like more questions, or I'd have to have more information about like the direct scenario, because the hypothetical is like you could say like what if somebody lets a bear loose
Right.
in the zoo, like what's the bear doing? Like how big is the bear? What kind of a bear is it?
It seems that what if questions sort of always get you going in the wrong direction, but there's a point where the handoff has to happen between the consensual and the voluntary to the non-consensual, non-voluntary. And that's the question is, at what point do you just extend the conversation until the non-consensual, non-voluntary shows up?
So I could never find myself working in a situation where there would be an involuntary possibility.
Hmm.
Um, what I will say for others that are in those situations is it's not about what you're doing with the person. It's about admitting that you don't have the skill set to work with this person, and so you're
Mhm.
defaulting to that choice. Because I would
Hmm.
say, think about it if it was a family member. What would you do with your sister as a bottle of pills? And you're like, oh, I have to call the police. You're going to take them. It's like, then you have to own the fact that you called the police on your sister. And then that impact is also yours. And this whole, like, I was put in a choice that, like, I think that's part of the lived experience respect thing is like, we all make choices. And so if we're making a choice to work with people who are in unimaginable situations, then we also bear the accountability for every choice we make, whether or not we intended that to be the outcome.
Hmm. I'll ask one more question from Dustin. Unfortunately, sometimes saving someone is just a matter of perspective, and when does yours become more relevant than the person in crisis? I guess it's a question and a point he's making. The pers Unfortunately, sometimes saving someone is just a matter of perspective, and when does yours become more relevant than the person in their crisis?
I think I was just agreeing kind of with what Z was saying, that sometimes we get stuck in a track where we're trying to save someone, and unfortunately, that's just our perspective sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Saving them to what life? Saving them to, what they're continuing to fight against. And that's
Right.
always our choice to make. So I was,
Mm-hmm.
yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Dustin.
Jason, sir, you had one other question from Sarah Rosenthal for Z. Z, how do you respond to situations with imminent safety concerns, like report someone's threatening themselves or others with a weapon?
Again, I think it depends on a multitude of factors. It's like, yeah, what kind of a weapon? How well do I know? Like I would need like a whole, like an actual scenario. It's like asking like, what would you do if someone brought a bomb into your house? You're like, there's a zillion ways I can answer that.
Well, thank you so much, Z. This has really been very informative and challenging.